My dad was born in Victoria, and his mom worked at BC Tel. His dad was a drinker and a fighter and owned a gas station. One time we went with our grandpa to the racetrack, and my mom was all upset because he bet his old age pension and his veteran's pension on a horse. Of course he won, right? My mom was saying to my dad, well, you got to stop him. Well, I can't stop him from doing anything like that. Anyway, my grandparents split up, so my dad was raised by his mom. She wasn't all that much fun. My dad worked in the woods, put himself through university working in the woods as an engineer and an axeman, orienteering and doing timber cuts. And imagine what the woods were like in the late 40s in BC. So he put himself through, became a logging engineer and worked for McMillan Blodell. Now, we were all born in Nanaimo, except for my one sister. When I was, for grade 1, my dad got this big promotion, Vice President McMillan Blodell, and we moved to Vancouver, and we moved to 57th and Angus Drive, to our house, where Bonshi happened. Anyway, I guess it was 12 years of our lives, but it seems like the most important part of all of our lives. My mom would put on Christmas parties. Remember when you're a kid and the adults are having a party you don't really understand? Like half the economy of BC was there. Jack Monroe and Herb Doman and H.R. McMillan. And my mom looked like Doris Day. She just looked perfect, right? And the house was all set up. And remember my brother and I listening on the top of the stairs like, wow, the adults are doing this. We had an Uncle Wally, and he had this cackle. He's one of these guys, like a real chain smoker and a drinker. And he really didn't like Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau. So we'd keep pouring his rye and sevens. Eventually he would say, Pierre Trudeau is a fucking cocksucker. And then, okay, boys, it's time to go to bed. Okay, so we'd go up to bed. Anyway, when I was a kid, I know you guys will find this hard to believe. I was totally fine talking to strangers. So my dad used to take me in the Grum and Goose in his company plane, and we'd go. I guess it was also just the age, whatever. My brother wouldn't talk to strangers. He'd always tell me, don't tell Mom that I left you in the cook shack for 8 hours or whatever. I would never say anything. We'd go in the Grum and Goose. I'd catch fish off the dock, and I would get to see the respect that these men in the woods had for my father. He was responsible for a lot of men and a lot of machines. He was part of when they bought the Martin Mars flying tankers, because at that time, people talk about them now, they've been sold. The government forester would just show up and just take a note of how far the fire had burned. So these things, they put the fires out on Vancouver Island. And we used to crawl in the rubber tunnels and the wings. And anyway, I went to logging conferences, and I remember you couldn't do that now. My dad would leave me up in the room. And what did I have? I had everything that I could ever want. I was never happier. I had the 3 channels on the TV, and I could go down the hallway to the pop machine. The pop machine was that was our first commercial transaction. Pop and ice. I was just so happy. The other thing that happened is there'd be all these American kids, and I would just tell the biggest bullshit stories to these kids. I remember my dad going, so what did you tell those kids from Everett, Washington anyway? And I went, oh, never mind. Oh, I guess it doesn't matter, right? So when I was, I guess I was about 10, my brother and I went to Copper Canyon on Vancouver Island, and they were cutting the Douglas firs for the Expo 70 pavilion. And so there was 50 Douglas firs all over 250 feet high. So they cut them down. Normally they cut them into 40 feet lengths. Yeah, I know you're not supposed to do that now. And there's pictures, if you go McMillan Blodell, Expo 70 logs, 2 off-road logging trucks 100 yards apart with these trees on 2 log trucks. And we took them down to the water. They boomed them over to Vancouver. They almost went off the ship in a typhoon, but they went to Expo 70, right? Another thing that was really cool that I did with my dad is we went on, M&B had a reservation on the old CP ferry that used to go downtown to downtown. It had rail cars in the bottom. It was 4 hours there and 4 hours back. So you get the CP silverware, et cetera, et cetera. Later on, when I had a girlfriend, we used to take the ferry. It would go from 4 till 8 and then back. So we would rent a stateroom with our teenage girlfriends and tell lies to our parents as to where we were. So that was a lot of fun too. Anyway, my dad would occasionally, he had a bit of a temper and he didn't like people that didn't perform well. So my dad would be coming down the lane. He took the bus home a lot of times and he'd be coming down the lane and you could just see him jaunting along, and the dog, our Dalmatian, was all excited to see him, and he'd come and he'd mess up my hair and he'd go, well, Sport, he called me Sport, and he's rolling around on the carpet with my dog, and my mom looks at me and goes, he fired somebody today. So we'd wait for dinner, and my dad would say, oh, Johnson, well, he's no longer with the company. So anyway, he had a temper. I had some great times with my dad. It was a different time. I try to make a balance of fun and life and family. And Bob Chisholm, I think of him every day.